Let's be honest with each other for a moment. If you look at the modern battlefield, a place dominated by modern missiles, active protection systems, and tanks that cost as much as a small island, and then you look at the FV103 Spartan, you have to ask a difficult question. Why are we looking at this? It is a 50-year-old aluminum box. It was designed when disco was topping the charts, and the Cold War was freezing over. By all modern military standards, it is obsolete. The British Army, the very people who built it, sent it to the retirement home nearly 15 years ago. When it first arrived in Ukraine in July 2022, the serious military analysts didn't applaud. They shrugged. They looked at its thin armor, its cramped interior, and its weak machine gun, and they labeled it junkyard tech, a desperate band-aid for a desperate army. But here is the mystery that defies the spreadsheets and the war college doctrines. 3.5 years into the most brutal conventional war of the 21st century, the number of these obsolete vehicles on the front line hasn't vanished. It has exploded, from a handful of donations to a fleet of hundreds. Even more baffling, while modern heavy multi-million-dollar tanks are burning in the mud of the Donbass, this little aluminum relic has an 82.5% survival rate. How does a vehicle that was essentially thrown away by NATO become a frontline monster in Ukraine? Is it possible that our obsession with high-tech, high-cost armor has blinded us to the brutal reality of what actually works in a war of attrition? Today, we are going to dive deep into the metal soul of the Spartan. We are going to strip away the paint and the propaganda to analyze why a piece of Cold War history is outperforming the cutting edge. We will look at the terrifying trade-offs its crews make every single day, trading armor for speed and comfort for survival. Is the Spartan a hero? Or is it a death trap that got lucky? The answer is far more complicated and far more uncomfortable than you might think. By the way, this video marks the launch of a completely new format on our channel, a pilot episode for our deep dive series. We are moving beyond simple spec sheets to rigorously analyze how specific Western systems have actually performed after 4 grueling years of combat in Ukraine. And your feedback on this approach is crucial. Let us know in the comments. To understand the miracle of the Spartan survival, we first have to understand what it was supposed to be, and more importantly, what it was never meant to be. Go back to the 1970s. The British engineers who drafted the blueprints for the Combat Vehicle Reconnaissance Tracked Family, the CVRT, were operating under a specific philosophy. They didn't want a brawler. They wanted a ghost. The design brief was simple. Create a vehicle fast enough to keep up with the tanks, but light enough to be air transportable. They made a radical choice. Instead of heavy steel, they constructed the hull from a welded aluminum alloy. The thickest part of its armor, the front plate, is only 60 millimeters deep. In the brutal calculus of ballistics, that means it stops a 14.5 millimeter round, a heavy machine gun bullet, but only if it's fired from 200 meters away. Anything closer, anything bigger, it punches right through. This was not a machine designed to storm trenches. It was a support worker. In the early 1980s, its job was to hide in the bushes, carrying teams equipped with Javelin and Starburst manpads, shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles. It was a glorified delivery truck for specialists. By 2009, the British military looked at the Spartan and decided its time was up. The world had changed. Make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on so you don't miss our next video. In the dusty roads of Iraq and Afghanistan, where the threat was an IED buried in the sand, a flat-bottomed aluminum hull was a liability. The British replaced it with the Panther, a wheeled, comfortable modern vehicle based on an Italian design. The Spartan was stripped of its duties and sent to the scrapyard. So, when the full-scale invasion of Ukraine began, and the UK dusted off 35 of these retirees to send east, the expectations were incredibly low. Against the Russian war machine, the Spartan looked paltry, inadequate, a token gesture. But war has a funny way of humiliating the experts. The analysts missed something crucial. They were judging the Spartan by the rules of NATO doctrine, mechanized warfare where infantry fighting vehicles advance side by side with tanks, suppressing the enemy with autocannons. But the Ukrainians realized very quickly that if they used the Spartan like a Bradley or a Warrior, they would die. The armor simply couldn't take it. So, they didn't try to force the Spartan to be a tank. They looked at its specs, the very things that looked like weaknesses, and flipped the script. They turned this support vehicle into the world's most dangerous taxi. Listen to the words of a Ukrainian soldier describing their new doctrine. Our job is to move in unnoticed, complete the task unnoticed, drop off the assault team unnoticed, get in, get our guys out. That's our main mission. Notice the repetition of the word unnoticed. This is the key. In a war where the sky is filled with thousands of watching eyes, drones that can spot a mouse in a field, being big and heavy is a death sentence. The Spartan is tiny. It is under 17 feet long and less than 9 feet tall. You can tuck it under a tree, throw a net over it, and it vanishes. Compare that to a BMP-3 or a massive American Bradley. The Spartan is a ghost. The strategy is terrifyingly simple but effective. The vehicle waits, engine off, hidden in a tree line miles from the contact line. This minimizes its thermal signature. It's cold, dark, and silent. Ahead, FPV drones scout the route, looking for the gaps in the Russian vision. When the call comes, the driver hits the ignition on the 4.2-liter Jaguar engine. This is a petrol engine, capable of pushing this aluminum box to 60 miles per hour. That is a mile a minute. They burst from cover. They aren't marching, they are sprinting. The goal is to slash the reaction time of the enemy. By the time a Russian drone operator spots the movement, relays the coordinates to the artillery battery, and the gunners lay the weapon, the Spartan is already gone. It has dropped its stormtroopers right on the trench line and is peeling away. This is the armored taxi concept. It is not about fighting from the vehicle. It is about delivering the fight to the enemy and surviving the commute. There is another factor here, one that you cannot understand until you have stood in a field in the Donbass in November. The soil, the infamous black earth. When it rains, or when the spring thaw hits, this ground turns into a substance that defies physics. It swallows boots, it swallows trucks, and it swallows tanks. We have seen the footage. 60-ton German Leopard 2 tanks, miracles of engineering, churning helplessly in the mud, sinking to their axles. A stuck tank is a dead tank. This is where the Spartan's weakness, its lightweight, becomes its superpower. The Spartan weighs just over 10 tons. That weight is distributed across 2 tracks. If you do the math, the ground pressure it exerts is roughly 0.4 kilograms per square centimeter. To put that in perspective, a human soldier jumping off the back of a Spartan might get their boots stuck in the mud, while the vehicle itself glides over the top. A T-72 tank exerts more than double that pressure. In the soggy hell of the Eastern Front, mobility is not just a feature. It is the primary layer of armor. If you can move where the enemy thinks movement is impossible, you have the tactical advantage. The tracks, which the British saw as a maintenance headache, are the only reason these units can operate in the rainy season. And there is a darker accidental benefit to being so light. Anti-tank mines. Most Soviet-era pressure mines are designed to trigger when a main battle tank rolls over them, usually set for 150 to 300 kilograms of pressure. The Spartan is so light that it falls into a gray zone. There are reports, unconfirmed but persistent, of Spartans driving over minefields that would have vaporized a T-90 simply because they didn't press down hard enough to trip the fuse. It's not a guarantee. Nobody wants to test it. But it's a margin of survival that heavy armor doesn't have. However, we must be careful not to romanticize this machine. It is effective, yes, but it is brutal on the people inside. The Spartan was designed to carry 4 passengers and 3 crew members, 7 people. That was the polite British specification. In Ukraine, those specifications have been thrown out the window. The interior is cramped. It was built for men of the 1970s, carrying 1970s kit. Today's soldiers are wearing bulky body armor, carrying grenade launchers, drones, and extra ammo. It is, as one soldier put it, Tetris. But when the mission is medical evacuation, comfort becomes irrelevant, and we cannot ignore the morale factor. For infantry pinned down under heavy fire, hearing that Jaguar engine roar is the sound of salvation. It's the cavalry arriving when hope is lost, a psychological boost that no spreadsheet can quantify. In the chaotic retreat from positions near Bakhmut, The Spartan became the ambulance of last resort. Speed matters when a soldier is bleeding out. Every second delay is a drop of life lost. We have accounts of crews packing 12, even 13 people into a space meant for 4. Imagine that. The smell of sweat, blood, oil, and cordite. The roar of the engine, the vehicle bouncing over shell craters at 50 miles an hour. One crew member shared a story that chills the blood. They had to evacuate a reconnaissance soldier, a giant of a man, nearly 6'5". He was badly wounded. There was no room on the bench. They laid him on the floor, and the others packed in around him, sitting on top of gear, hanging onto straps, praying that the aluminum walls would hold. And this brings us to the elephant in the room: the armor. Every soldier inside a Spartan knows that they are riding in a soda can. The aluminum hull is susceptible. It was never meant to take a hit from a modern RPG, let alone an anti-tank guided missile. There is a terrifying story from the Gulf War that illustrates this. A British Challenger 1 tank, confused by the thermal sights at long range, fired on a friendly Spartan. The round decimated the vehicle. The crew survived miraculously, but it proved a point. In a direct fight with heavy caliber weapons, the Spartan loses. In Ukraine, the threat is everywhere. A Russian Lancet drone detonated right next to a Spartan recently. The shockwave crumpled the side, dented the metal, but the vehicle kept moving. The crew walked away. The aluminum absorbed the blast and the shrapnel just enough to keep the soft flesh inside intact. "The most important thing is keeping the crew alive," a soldier said. "If the machine gets taken out after that, well, that's just how it goes." The crew knows the risks. They know that if a drone hits them square in the side with a shaped charge, it's over. But they also know that the alternative is walking or riding in an unarmored truck. In that equation, the Spartan is a luxury. The Ukrainians did not just accept the Spartan's flaws, they engineered around them. This is where the story shifts from military history to a masterclass in improvisation. The base Spartan comes with a tiny 7.62mm machine gun in an assault on a fortified Russian trench. That is about as useful as a staple gun. The Ukrainians looked at that commander's hatch and decided it needed some American muscle. They started mounting the legendary Browning M2 machine gun. Suddenly, the taxi had teeth. It could punch through brick walls and light armor from a mile away. Some units even mounted Mk-19 automatic grenade launchers, turning the Spartan into a mobile artillery piece capable of suppressing an entire tree line. But there is a catch, a deadly catch. The original British gun could be fired from inside under armor. The Browning cannot. To fire it, the gunner has to open the hatch and stand up, exposing his head and torso to shrapnel and snipers. It is a horrific choice. Stay safe inside and be harmless, or stand up to fight and risk your life. To mitigate this, Ukrainian welders began fabricating homemade shields, steel cages around the gunner's hatch, to offer some protection. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. They tackled the interior space too. The 24th Brigade reportedly gutted the interior of their Spartans, removing the original seating and racks to create a stadium. There's loads of space now, they claim. They fixed the leaky hatches with silicone spray. They added external sensors so the driver can watch oil pressure and coolant levels without opening the hatch. They installed modern Harris radios because the 1970s British comms were incompatible with modern encryption. This is not factory standard maintenance. This is hot rodding for survival. Now, we must zoom out. We have talked about the mud, the armor, and the guns. But the real reason the Spartan is winning the war of analysis is economic. In the West, we have spent the last 30 years chasing the silver bullet. We built the F-35. We built the Zumwalt destroyer. We built the future combat systems. We assumed that one incredibly expensive high-tech platform was worth 1,000 cheap ones. Ukraine is proving that logic wrong. Let's look at the price tag. A refurbished Spartan bought by volunteers costs approximately $50,000. That is the price of a decent civilian pickup truck. Now look at an American M2 Bradley. The replacement cost is roughly $4.35 million. Do the math. You can put 87 Spartans on the battlefield for the cost of one Bradley. Even if the Bradley is a better fighting vehicle, and it undeniably is, can it be in 87 places at once? No. In a war of attrition, quantity has a quality all its own. Russia is burning through its stockpiles, pulling T-62s from the 1960s and even T-34s from museums. They are playing a numbers game. If the West tries to match them only with Ferraris, we will run out of cars. The Spartan is the Toyota Hilux of this war. Cheap, reliable, and available in numbers that actually matter. This is why the fundraising campaigns were so successful. When the Serhiy Prytula Charity Foundation announced a crowdfunder for Spartans, they raised $6.5 million in 36 hours. Think about that emotion. People donating their birthday money, their savings, to buy 60 of these aluminum boxes. Why? Because they understand what the analysts missed. They don't need a perfect vehicle in 2026. They need a working vehicle today. We cannot end this deep dive without addressing the Achilles heel of the Spartan. It is not the armor, it is the calendar. These machines are old. The rubber seals are drying out. The tracks are wearing thin. And unlike a modern Toyota, you cannot just go to an auto parts store to buy a new transmission for a Jaguar J60 engine. Spare parts are a nightmare. The UK donated the vehicles, but they didn't have a warehouse full of spares to send with them. Volunteers have to scour the globe, hunting down private collectors and surplus depots to find a specific gasket or a track link. For the machines officially transferred by the UK, there aren't enough spare parts included, a mechanic noted. And then there are the tracks themselves. A tracked vehicle is great in mud, but if a track snaps in the middle of a firefight, you are stationary. A stationary vehicle is a coffin. Tensioning the tracks is an art form. Too tight, they snap. Too loose, they fall off. British instructors taught the Ukrainians to check the tension with a fist, because in the heat of battle, you don't have measuring tools. The mechanics in Ukraine are performing miracles, keeping these geriatric engines running on sheer will and ingenuity. But every day, the fleet gets a little older, a little more worn. So, let's return to the question we started with. Is the Spartan a piece of junk? If you compare it to a glossy brochure for a brand new German Lynx IFV, yes, it's slow, it's weak, and it's old. But war is not fought in brochures. It is fought in the mud, under the constant buzz of killer drones with limited budgets and unlimited danger. In that reality, the Spartan is a masterpiece of adaptation. It represents a shift in how we must think about modern conflict. We are seeing that simple, maintainable, and numerous beats complex, fragile, and few. The Spartan succeeds because it is humble. It doesn't try to be a tank destroyer. It doesn't try to be a bunker. It accepts its role. Move fast, stay low, and get the men home. The 82.5% survival rate is not a fluke. It is the result of Ukrainian soldiers taking a tool that was discarded by the West and sharpening it into a weapon of survival. It forces us to look in the mirror. While NATO debates sending a dozen ultra-modern tanks that require 6 months of training and a dedicated logistics chain, a fleet of 50-year-old taxis is doing the heavy lifting on the zero line. Maybe the Spartan isn't the one that should be retired. Maybe it's our outdated idea of what a good military vehicle actually looks like. Because on the front lines of the Donbass, when the artillery starts falling and the mud is knee-deep, nobody is asking for a computerized wonder weapon that might arrive next year. They are asking for the aluminum box that can start its engine right now, hit 60 miles an hour, and carry them away from death. And that is why the Spartan, against all odds, is still running. What do you think? In a modern war, would you rather have one high-tech Bradley protecting your sector? Or 80 Spartans swarming the line? Is quantity really better than quality when lives are on the line? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to understand more about the weapons shaping this conflict, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Just between us, while putting this script together, I couldn't stop thinking about that soldier's comment regarding Tetris. It really shifts your perspective. We sit here safe in our studios debating millimeter thickness of armor or ground pressure statistics. But for the guys on the ground, this obsolete tin can is the only thing standing between them and a mortar round. It's a humbling reminder that sometimes the best equipment isn't the one with the most expensive computer inside. It's just the one that starts when you turn the key. It's crazy how a vehicle I would have laughed at 5 years ago is now something I genuinely respect. Anyway, thanks for watching, and see you in the next one. Stay safe.